The memory of the storm remained clearer to Commissar Rashir Kallus than the faces of several men who had served under him for more than a decade. The cold had reduced identity into function. Names became secondary to firing lines, ammunition counts, and body temperature checks. During the final days of the defense, every living soldier within the northern industrial perimeter had begun speaking less, conserving breath beneath frost-covered rebreathers, while the hive winds screamed across the frozen manufactorum districts like damaged reactor sirens. Kallus would later describe the experience not as fear, but as prolonged mechanical endurance. The enemy had not behaved like conventional invaders. There were no speeches transmitted across Vox channels, no demands for surrender, no artillery preparation recognizable by Imperial standards. Entire platoons simply vanished during the early nights of the campaign. Sentry positions stopped responding. Supply convoys disappeared along snow corridors less than 3 kilometers from fortified positions. Men reported hearing laughter within the storm itself. Others described seeing moving lights beneath the ice fields surrounding the outer hive foundations. The Commissar had initially dismissed such reports as symptoms of exposure and fatigue. By the 7th day of the northern defense line, he no longer dismissed anything. Rashir Kallus was born on the fortress world of Brimlock, in the eastern fringe regions of Segmentum Obscurus, during Millennia 41, year 864. He came from a militarized industrial district that supplied trained officer candidates to the Schola Progenium under Departamento Munitorum quotas. His father had served within the Astra Militarum Armored Corps before being executed for desertion during a retreat operation against Orc forces near the Golnar Reach. His mother died during an atmospheric refinery collapse several years later. At the age of 9 standard years, Kallus entered the Schola system, alongside several thousand other war orphans. He developed a reputation for discipline rather than aggression. Instructors noted that he lacked charisma, but demonstrated exceptional emotional restraint. During psychological examinations, he scored unusually high in operational composure under sustained stress conditions. Such traits made him suitable for commissarial conditioning. By adulthood, Kallus stood approximately 184 centimeters in height, with a lean physical build maintained through strict military conditioning rather than natural strength. His hair had darkened prematurely during his early 30s, while a noticeable scar extended across the left side of his jawline from an earlier mutiny suppression aboard a transport frigate operating near the Cadian Gate. His assignment to the Valhallan Ice Warriors occurred during the later stages of the Celtic border conflicts. Unlike many commissars attached to Valhallan regiments, Kallus never attempted to dominate the culture of the Ice Warriors through excessive executions or theatrical displays of authority. He understood quickly that Valhallans already possessed extraordinary endurance. Harsh discipline alone offered little improvement to soldiers raised upon frozen death worlds. Instead, Kallus focused upon order, predictability, and logistical efficiency. The regiment assigned to Hive Glaciem Primus was the 109th Valhallan Ice Warriors, a reduced-strength formation operating at approximately 62% combat capacity following previous anti-pirate deployments in nearby systems. Their transport convoy arrived within the Hive system during the opening months of Millennia 41, year 998, after astropathic reports confirmed increased Xenos activity along surrounding trade routes. Glaciem Primus itself existed upon a near-frozen industrial hive world, categorized as a secondary manufacturer and producer for heavy drilling equipment, sub-zero chemical processors, and promethium refinement systems. The northern outskirts of the Hive contained enormous industrial sectors interconnected by elevated cargo rails, underground generator tunnels, frozen coolant rivers, and heavily armored refinery districts. Population density within the northern sectors had once exceeded 19 million laborers before environmental collapse, and repeated winter expansion reduced active habitation zones to less than 8 million. The planet's climate had deteriorated steadily over centuries. Continuous industrial output poisoned atmospheric regulation systems, while orbital damage from ancient conflicts weakened thermal stabilization arrays positioned above the northern hemisphere. Massive hyperborean storms now consumed entire sectors for months at a time. Visibility during severe weather frequently dropped below 5 meters. Flesh exposed to the environment froze within minutes. Such conditions favored the Valhallans. Kallus received attachment orders, placing him alongside a specialized defensive infantry detachment commanded unofficially by Senior Sergeant Anton Petrovich. The squad consisted of 6 Valhallan soldiers alongside an Ogryn auxiliary designated Baru. Petrovich himself was 46 standard years old and had served continuously since the Vorgan ice rebellions. His beard carried permanent frost discoloration, while extensive burn damage marked portions of his neck beneath layered winter armor. Unlike many non-commissioned officers within the Astra Militarum, Petrovich rarely raised his voice. He issued commands quietly and expected immediate compliance. Dimir Chenkov served as the squad's primary marksman and reconnaissance specialist. Thin even by Valhallan standards, Chenkov possessed unusually pale eyes and suffered partial hearing loss from prior mortar bombardments. Ferik Jurgson operated heavy weapon systems and carried a modified autocannon adapted for cold weather operation. Valena Gray functioned as field medic and Vox technician simultaneously due to severe personnel shortages across the regiment. Sophia Russa specialized in anti-armor operations and demolition procedures. Records described her as highly intelligent, but prone to insubordination during non-combat periods. Baru the Ogryn remained the squad's most physically imposing member, standing nearly 3 meters tall beneath layered thermal armor plating. Baru had served alongside Valhallan regiments for over 6 years after surviving catastrophic casualties within his previous abhuman support detachment. Unlike many Ogryns, Baru demonstrated moderate tactical memory retention and responded effectively to simple battlefield planning. He referred to Commissar Kallus consistently as Boss Commissar. The squad had already gained recognition among nearby companies before the northern deployment began. During an earlier transport ambush near the lower ice corridors, Petrovich's unit successfully evacuated over 80 wounded personnel while maintaining defensive formation against raider assaults for nearly 4 hours without armored reinforcement. Such actions earned commendations from regimental command, though Kallus observed that none of the squad members discussed the incident openly afterward. Their deployment toward the northern industrial outskirts occurred under deteriorating operational conditions. Astropathic communication delays increased across the planet. Orbital defense monitors detected unidentified vessels briefly entering low atmospheric positions before disappearing beyond scanner range. Several mining settlements beyond Hive Glaciem Primus ceased all transmission simultaneously during a 14-hour period. Initial investigations found abandoned infrastructure, frozen corpses, and evidence of severe close-quarters violence inconsistent with conventional raids. Then the storms intensified. Kallus remembered standing within the interior loading bay of Northern Bastion 17, while snow hammered against reinforced blast shutters hard enough to resemble artillery impacts. Entire walls vibrated beneath the pressure. Servitors struggled to maintain generator stability, while exhausted labor crews unloaded ammunition containers coated in several centimeters of ice. That was the first night he observed genuine uncertainty among the Valhallans. Not fear, not panic, uncertainty. The distinction mattered to him. Experienced soldiers did not fear storms, starvation, or prolonged combat. They feared patterns they could not understand. Within 48 hours of entering the northern perimeter, patrols began reporting movement beyond defensive floodlights. Shapes appeared briefly atop refinery towers before vanishing. Motion trackers malfunctioned continuously. Vox interference worsened each night between approximately 0100 and 0300 local standard time. Then came the first confirmed disappearance. A 12-man sentry unit stationed along Coolant Trench Delta-9 transmitted a partial distress signal describing unidentified attackers emerging directly from the storm wall itself. The transmission ended abruptly after 23 seconds. Recovery teams discovered the trench abandoned. No bodies remained. Blood trails extended across the ice for nearly 80 meters before disappearing beneath fresh snowfall. Kallus personally reviewed the site 6 hours later. He found no shell casings, no signs of defensive formation, no evidence the Valhallans had even managed to fire their weapons. Only silence remained beneath the storm. Northern Bastion 17 functioned as one of the final operational defensive nodes, protecting the outer manufacturum arteries leading toward the central hive districts of Glaciem Primus. Originally constructed as a cargo redistribution station nearly 4 centuries earlier, the structure had gradually transformed into a hardened military fortress through repeated retrofitting projects conducted during prior planetary conflicts. The upper sections of the bastion remained partially buried beneath permanent ice accumulation, while lower industrial corridors extended several kilometers underground through frozen utility tunnels connected to refinery districts and abandoned labor sectors. By the time Commissar Rashir Kallus arrived alongside Petrovich's detachment, the bastion already housed over 4,000 active personnel drawn from fragmented Imperial formations. Valhallan infantry occupied the majority of defensive positions, though smaller numbers of planetary defense troops, displaced labor militia, combat engineers, and surviving armored crews operated throughout the complex. Conditions inside the bastion reflected prolonged operational strain rather than outright collapse. Heating systems functioned inconsistently. Food distribution occurred twice daily under ration restrictions. Ammunition remained plentiful for standard LAS-pattern weaponry, but heavy weaponry supply had begun slowing due to convoy losses along the northern transport lanes. The soldiers adapted without complaint. Valhallans measured hardship differently from most regiments within the Astra Militarum. Exposure to sub-zero conditions formed part of their upbringing long before military induction. Most of the 109th Ice Warriors wore layered thermal coats reinforced with insulated flak plating, rebreather masks, ice goggles, and chemically heated gloves designed for extended outdoor operations. Frost accumulation regularly formed across shoulders, helmets, and weapon housings, even while stationed indoors. Kallus observed quickly that Petrovich's squad maintained stricter preparation standards than neighboring detachments. Their equipment inspections occurred every 4 hours, regardless of operational fatigue. Weapons were dismantled constantly to prevent freezing mechanisms. Uniform damage received immediate repair. Ammunition magazines remained wrapped in insulated cloth whenever possible to preserve firing efficiency. Valena Gray maintained a handwritten inventory ledger tracking medical supplies, batteries, fuel cells, ration packs, and anti-freeze compounds with obsessive precision. Such habits increased survival probability. Anton Petrovich himself maintained authority through competence rather than intimidation. His squad trusted him because he understood environmental warfare intimately. During their second night inside Bastion 17, Kallus witnessed Petrovich physically strike a young replacement soldier attempting to sleep beside an exterior wall. The impact knocked the man unconscious briefly. Several nearby personnel reacted with visible anger until Petrovich ordered them to examine the wall directly. A thin layer of internal frost had begun forming beneath damaged insulation plating. Another 2 hours of exposure would likely have killed the soldier during sleep. Afterward, nobody questioned Petrovich's methods again. Dimir Chenkov operated primarily beyond the immediate defensive perimeter. His reconnaissance assignments frequently required solitary movement through frozen maintenance corridors and abandoned infrastructure zones where visibility remained almost non-existent beneath storm conditions. Chenkov carried a modified long-last rifle equipped with thermal shielding and reduced light optics adapted specifically for ice warfare. He rarely spoke during group discussions, unless providing operational observations. Kallus initially interpreted the man's silence as detachment. He later realized Chenkov simply conserved energy through minimal speech. Ferik Jurgson contrasted sharply against the rest of the squad. Broad-shouldered and physically imposing, even beneath heavy thermal armor, Jurgson handled the squad's autocannon systems alongside portable ammunition sleds modified for snow transport. He possessed a reputation among nearby infantry units for surviving impossible defensive actions. Rumors claimed Jurgson once continued operating a heavy bolter for nearly 20 minutes after suffering severe abdominal trauma during anti-pirate operations near the Korvath Reach. The story remained unverified, though extensive scar tissue visible beneath his medical records suggested substantial truth behind such accounts. Unlike Chenkov, Jurgson spoke frequently, usually regarding food. Sophia Russa represented the squad's most volatile element. Younger than most Valhallan veterans assigned to the northern perimeter, Russa originated from lower manufacturum districts on Valhalla itself before conscription into military service during adolescence. her expertise centered around demolition equipment, anti-armor warfare, and structural sabotage operations. Records indicated exceptional performance during training exercises, paired with repeated disciplinary warnings concerning insubordination toward superior officers. Kallus reviewed those records carefully before deployment. He expected conflict eventually. Instead, Russa displayed absolute professionalism throughout the opening defensive stages. She obeyed orders precisely, maintained equipment beyond regulation standards, and demonstrated remarkable composure during artillery bombardments. The only visible indication of tension appeared through repetitive hand movements while stationary. She constantly adjusted gloves, weapon straps, detonator housings, or ammunition clips whenever inactive, longer than several seconds. Valena Gray functioned as the operational center, holding the squad together. Medical responsibilities alone would have overwhelmed most field medics operating under northern conditions. Frostbite treatment, infection control, respiratory failure, chemical burns, and trauma stabilization occurred continuously throughout Bastion 17 as environmental exposure combined with combat injuries. Yet Gray simultaneously maintained Vox communications, logistical inventories, casualty records, and emergency routing assignments during active engagements. She rarely slept longer than 90 minutes consecutively. Kallus eventually noticed that Gray consumed stimulant compounds almost continuously during operational periods. Her hands trembled occasionally while updating supply manifests, though her voice remained calm regardless of circumstances. She spoke with clipped precision, resembling administrative officers rather than combat personnel. Among the squad, Gray appeared closest to exhaustion even before direct engagement with enemy forces began. Baru required simpler management. The Ogryn occupied a reinforced lower chamber near vehicle maintenance corridors where ceiling height permitted comfortable movement. Despite his enormous size, Baru demonstrated surprising caution around smaller personnel. He avoided crowded passageways whenever possible and followed Petrovich constantly during patrol assignments, like an armored shadow. His primary weapon consisted of a heavily modified Ripper gun, fitted with insulated gripping systems, and enlarged ammunition feeds adapted for gloved operation within extreme cold. Several younger guardsmen feared Baru initially. That ended after the first bombardment. When malfunctioning cargo supports collapsed during a storm impact, Baru physically lifted part of the fallen structure long enough for trapped personnel to escape beneath shifting steel beams. 2 soldiers survived solely because the Ogryn held nearly 2 tons of fractured metal overhead, while engineers secured reinforcement chains. Afterward, most troops within Bastion 17 treated him with visible respect. Mission briefings began approximately 12 hours after Kallus joined the squad officially. Senior officers assembled within a partially heated command chamber constructed beneath the Bastion's western artillery galleries. Tactical hololiths projected unstable imaging across frost-covered metal tables, while Vox operators struggled to maintain communication with neighboring defensive sectors. Environmental interference disrupted orbital scanning continuously. Long-range Auspex systems reported conflicting readings throughout the northern wastelands beyond the Hive perimeter. Colonel Vare, commanding officer of the 109th Valhallan, delivered the operational briefing personally. The northern industrial sectors contained several massive plasma coolant processors essential for maintaining lower Hive thermal stability. Loss of those facilities would destabilize heating distribution across multiple civilian habitation districts deeper within Glaciem Primus. Millions would likely freeze within weeks if the processes failed permanently. Imperial Command therefore classified the northern sectors as strategically non-negotiable. Withdrawal authorization did not exist. Reconnaissance reports confirmed increasing Xenos presence surrounding abandoned refinery zones beyond the outer perimeter. Initial assumptions identifying conventional raider activity had already proven inaccurate. Entire defensive platoons disappeared without sustained engagement. Patrol survivors described highly mobile attackers utilizing advanced skimmer craft, precision ambush tactics, and psychological warfare methods designed to isolate infantry units before elimination. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances when Colonel Vare finally identified the enemy officially. Drukhari. The word itself altered the atmosphere inside the chamber. Even experienced guardsmen understood the implications attached to dark Eldar incursions. Unlike orcs, traitors, or tyrannid organisms, the Drukhari did not invade worlds primarily for conquest. They harvested populations systematically. Civilian disappearances, mutilation sites, and unexplained torture killings already reported throughout outer settlements aligned precisely with known Drukhari behavior patterns documented by the Ordo Xenos. Kallus noticed Sophia Russa stop moving entirely during that portion of the briefing. No adjustments, no restless gestures, only complete silence. Colonel Vare outlined the operational reality with characteristic Valhallan directness. Reinforcements remained unavailable for at least several days due to warp route instability affecting nearby systems. Planetary defense fleets reported intermittent contact with unidentified hostile vessels operating beyond orbital scanner range. The 109th would therefore hold the northern sectors alone until additional Imperial forces arrived. Petrovich's squad received assignment to Defensive Corridor Theta-Nine, positioned along the northern outskirts, overlooking frozen industrial trenches connected to Plasma Refinery Complex Epsilon. The corridor represented a critical choke point between abandoned labor districts and the active manufacturum sectors deeper inside the Hive perimeter. If enemy forces breached Theta-Nine, they could potentially bypass several outer defense layers entirely. Estimated survival probability for the assigned position remained low. Nobody commented on it. Kallus reviewed terrain schematics alongside Petrovich after the briefing concluded. Theta-Nine contained interconnected trench networks, reinforced with icecrete barriers, elevated firing platforms, automated turret nests, and underground supply shelters constructed decades earlier during previous civil unrest. Environmental conditions complicated all defensive planning. Storm severity continued increasing daily. Visibility frequently collapsed to near zero during peak weather cycles. Under such conditions, enemy movement could occur almost undetected until direct engagement range. Petrovich studied the tactical maps silently for several minutes before speaking. "They'll come through the storm," he said quietly. Kallus looked toward him. "What makes you certain?" Petrovich adjusted one gloved finger against the frozen map surface, covering the northern wastelands. "Because if I was hunting men here," he replied, "that is exactly where I would come from. Deployment toward defensive corridor." Theta-Nine began during the third storm cycle, following the command briefing. Atmospheric conditions had deteriorated beyond previously recorded operational averages across the northern Hive perimeter. Wind speeds exceeded 100 kilometers per hour, while temperatures dropped low enough to freeze exposed hydraulic systems within minutes. Entire industrial towers vanished behind moving walls of white ice particles carried across the wastelands by hurricane-force pressure fronts descending from the polar sectors. Movement across the surface required tether lines. Even Valhallans treated the weather cautiously. Commissar Rashir Kallus departed Bastion 17 alongside Petrovich's detachment shortly after 0600 local standard time. The convoy assigned to Theta-Nine consisted of 3 reinforced Chimera transports, 2 tracked Munitorum supply haulers, and approximately 40 infantry personnel divided between multiple defensive squads. Visibility outside the transport compartments rarely extended beyond several meters. Searchlights reflected uselessly against the storm, illuminating only dense clouds of frozen debris swirling endlessly through the darkness. The interior of the Chimera, carrying Petrovich's unit, remained silent throughout most of the journey. Condensation formed continuously along metal surfaces, despite active heating systems. Weapons rested across armored laps, while transport vibrations shook frost loose from ceiling supports overhead. Sophia Russa spent much of the trip examining demolition detonators beneath dim compartment lights. Ferik Jurgson sat directly beside ammunition crates, feeding into the autocannon mount fixed above the rear hatch. Valena Gray reviewed casualty charts and supply ledgers simultaneously, while periodically adjusting failing Vox frequencies. Baru occupied nearly the entire rear section alone. The Ogryn appeared calm. Kallus noticed Anton Petrovich studying the transport walls rather than the personnel around him. The sergeant's expression remained controlled, though years of commissarial observation allowed Kallus to recognize heightened situational awareness beneath the man's silence. Petrovich listened constantly. Every mechanical vibration, every distant impact against the hull, every change in engine strain caused by shifting terrain beneath the convoy tracks. Several hours into the deployment, the convoy encountered the first visible signs of the northern collapse. Abandoned civilian transport vehicles emerged gradually from the storm like frozen corpses half buried beneath snowdrifts. Industrial haulers, worker crawlers, and damaged evacuation carriers littered portions of the transit routes leading deeper toward the outer refinery sectors. Many remained sealed shut beneath accumulated ice. Others had been forced open violently from the inside. Kallus observed frozen human remains through one partially shattered transport window as the Chimera passed slowly beside it. The bodies appeared untouched by scavengers. Their expressions suggested panic. No visible weapon damage existed upon the corpses themselves. Instead, several displayed severe frost exposure, as though they had attempted fleeing into the storm without adequate protection. One body near the rear hatch possessed extensive lacerations across the shoulders and neck, inconsistent with environmental injury. Thin black discoloration surrounded portions of the wounds. Valena Gray noticed Kallus observing the remains. "Recovery teams stopped operating here 3 days ago," she said without looking up from her ledger. "Too many disappearances." Kallus shifted his attention toward her. "Disappearances during recovery operations?" Gray nodded once. "Entire crews." The convoy continued northward. By approximately 1400 local time, the outer industrial districts of Hive Glaciem Primus began emerging through the storm. Massive refinery towers rose from the frozen wasteland, like skeletal monuments coated in centuries of accumulated ice and industrial residue. Elevated cargo rails stretched between manufacturing sectors overhead, while distant plasma flares illuminated portions of the storm clouds with dull blue light. Thick pipelines, wider than transport carriers, crossed the terrain in all directions. Many ruptured or partially collapsed beneath ice pressure and neglect. Despite the storm, the Hive never became silent. Machine noise persisted constantly beneath the wind. Generator vibrations, pressure vents, distant machinery, metal expansion caused by extreme cold. The entire northern perimeter sounded alive beneath the ice. Theta-Nine itself occupied a defensive trench complex positioned along the outskirts of refinery sector Epsilon 7. The corridor overlooked several frozen industrial avenues leading toward the active manufacturing districts farther south. Defensive fortifications stretched across nearly 2 kilometers of interconnected trenches, barricades, elevated gun nests, and underground bunkers reinforced with icecrete and salvaged refinery plating. The position had already suffered bombardment before their arrival. Several trench sections remained partially collapsed, while frozen corpses still occupied firing positions abandoned during earlier engagements. Combat engineers worked continuously to reinforce damaged barriers using industrial welding torches and portable excavation equipment. Nearby medici stations overflowed with wounded personnel suffering frostbite, burns, and psychological trauma from previous encounters beyond the perimeter. Most disturbing to Kallus were the survivors who refused to speak entirely. Not wounded soldiers, functional ones. Several guardsmen stationed along the outer trenches displayed complete emotional withdrawal despite remaining physically capable. They followed orders mechanically, maintained firing positions, and responded to commands appropriately. Yet their expressions remained vacant beneath frost-covered goggles. One young trooper repeatedly adjusted the same ammunition pouch for nearly 20 minutes without apparent awareness. Petrovich noticed it immediately. "How long since rotation?" he asked a nearby lieutenant. The officer looked exhausted. "Too long." That answer appeared sufficient. The squad established quarters inside an underground maintenance chamber connected directly to the Western Trench network. Conditions inside the bunker remained marginally warmer than the surface, though ice coated large portions of the interior walls regardless. Crates of ammunition, fuel canisters, emergency rations, and replacement power cells filled most available floor space. A damaged heating unit near the rear corridor produced intermittent warmth, accompanied by constant metallic clicking sounds. Kallus spent the remainder of the first evening conducting inspections across Theta-Nine alongside Petrovich. The defensive corridor relied heavily upon overlapping kill zones designed to channel enemy movement through narrow industrial approaches between frozen refinery structures. Heavy bolter nests occupied elevated positions overlooking the main transit routes, while minefields protected secondary flanking paths hidden beneath deep snow accumulation. Automated turret systems reinforced several choke points, though many suffered maintenance issues caused by environmental exposure. The northernmost trenches concerned Kallus immediately. Visibility there remained catastrophically poor. During peak storm intensity, soldiers stationed along the outer barricades could barely identify personnel standing several meters away. Thermal scanners malfunctioned continuously due to atmospheric distortion. Motion trackers produced false readings almost every hour. Enemy infiltration beneath such conditions appeared dangerously plausible. Petrovich shared the concern. "They already know the terrain," he said, while examining frost damage along one firing platform. "This doesn't feel like probing attacks anymore." Kallus glanced toward him. "You believe the raids are coordinated?" "I believe," Petrovich answered carefully, "that someone is studying us before they commit fully." That assessment proved accurate sooner than expected. The first confirmed contact occurred during the squad's second night stationed at Theta-Nine. Kallus had been reviewing perimeter reports inside the bunker command chamber when sudden Vox interference disrupted communications across the entire corridor simultaneously. Sharp bursts of static filled every active channel, while several lighting systems flickered unpredictably overhead. Nearby personnel reacted immediately. Weapons were raised. Defensive sirens activated throughout portions of the trench network. Then the northern floodlights failed. Complete darkness consumed the outer perimeter. For several seconds, only the storm remained audible. Then came the screaming. Not battlefield shouting, not panic alarms. Screaming. Raw human terror transmitted across open Vox frequencies from somewhere beyond the northern trenches. Multiple voices overlapped simultaneously. Gunfire erupted through the storm, accompanied by heavy weapon discharges echoing across the refinery structures outside. Kallus drew his bolt pistol immediately, while Petrovich ordered the squad toward defensive positions without hesitation. The entire bunker shook moments later as something impacted the outer barricades above. Kallus emerged onto the trench line alongside the Valhallans within less than a minute. The storm outside had intensified into near total white blindness beneath the failed floodlights. Snow and ice hammered against armor, plating hard enough to sting exposed skin instantly. Guardsmen along neighboring trenches fired continuously into the darkness beyond the perimeter, despite minimal visible targets. Then Kallus saw movement. Fast. Far faster than human infantry. Dark shapes crossed the storm briefly between refinery ruins, before vanishing again. Thin blue energy flashes illuminated portions of the snowfields as unfamiliar weapon fire struck defensive walls and sandbag positions. One nearby guardsman collapsed instantly beside a heavy bolter emplacement, his chest cavity partially vaporized by concentrated energy impact. Sophia Russa launched a missile toward one of the moving silhouettes. The explosion illuminated the battlefield for less than a second. That single second revealed enough. Tall armored figures moved through the storm with unnatural speed, their forms lean and elongated beneath black, segmented armor, reflecting pale blue lightning from the blizzard overhead. Some carried bladed weapons glowing faintly through the snow, while others fired sleek splinter weaponry, emitting bursts of crystalline projectiles. Smaller skimmer craft hovered silently above the ice beyond the trenches, weaving between refinery towers with predatory precision. Drukhari. The realization spread visibly across the trench network. Ferik Jurgson opened fire immediately with the autocannon, sending streams of explosive rounds into the storm corridor ahead. Baru roared loud enough to overpower the wind itself, while raising his ripper gun toward incoming movement beyond the barricades. Nearby, guardsmen reinforced firing lines, as alarms continued echoing through the industrial district. Yet the enemy did not fully engage. Not yet. The Drukhari struck quickly along isolated perimeter points before disappearing back into the storm almost immediately afterward. Several trench sections reported close-quarters assaults lasting less than 30 seconds before contact vanished entirely. Casualty reports flooded the Vox network faster than Medici teams could respond. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the attack ended. Only the storm remained again. Kallus stood within the frozen trench line, staring into the darkness beyond Theta-Nine, while snow accumulated across his coat and weapon casing. Around him, wounded guardsmen screamed for medics, while defensive crews reactivated damaged floodlights along the perimeter. Anton Petrovich approached quietly beside him. "That wasn't the invasion," the sergeant said. Kallus already understood. It had been reconnaissance. The days following the initial contact transformed Theta-Nine from a defensive corridor into an isolated battlefield ecosystem operating under continuous environmental collapse. Storm intensity increased across the northern outskirts of Hive Glaciem Primus, until conventional movement beyond fortified routes became nearly impossible without navigational beacons or tether guidance. Entire refinery districts disappeared behind permanent walls of blowing ice. Structures taller than several hundred meters vanished completely beneath white atmospheric distortion, despite remaining physically nearby. The storm altered warfare itself. Visibility, sound, communication, and reaction time deteriorated simultaneously. Lasfire reflected unpredictably through dense ice particles suspended within the air. Vox systems suffered constant disruption from atmospheric interference generated by the planet's unstable magnetic fields interacting with industrial plasma output. Even artillery targeting calculations became unreliable beyond moderate distances. For the Valhallans, survival depended less upon offensive maneuvering and more upon understanding terrain behavior minute by minute. Commissar Rashir Kallus spent much of the following operational period accompanying Anton Petrovich across the outer defensive sectors while evaluating strategic weaknesses surrounding Theta-Nine. The sergeant believed static defense alone would eventually fail against the Drukhari. The enemy demonstrated superior mobility, infiltration capability, and environmental adaptation despite the extreme cold. If they wanted a direct assault, Petrovich explained, while studying trench maps inside a partially collapsed observation bunker, they would already be inside the refinery sectors. Kallus understood the implication immediately. The Drukhari were not seeking immediate conquest. They were shaping the battlefield first. Theta-Nine occupied strategically valuable ground because of its relationship to the surrounding industrial terrain, rather than the defensive corridor itself. To the north, beyond the trench lines, stretched several kilometers of frozen manufactorum ruins and abandoned labor districts partially consumed by centuries of glacial expansion. Beneath those ruins existed extensive underground transit systems connecting maintenance tunnels, coolant pipelines, abandoned habitation sectors, and generator conduits leading deeper into active hive infrastructure. If enemy forces infiltrated the underground systems successfully, the entire northern defensive network could collapse without a conventional siege. Petrovich focused heavily upon securing elevated industrial positions overlooking these approach corridors. One of the most critical locations was Refinery Tower Kappa 17, a massive atmospheric filtration structure rising nearly 600 meters above the surrounding wasteland. Although partially abandoned after catastrophic reactor failures decades earlier, the tower still housed functioning Auspex relays and long-range observation equipment capable of monitoring movement across vast portions of the northern perimeter. Dimir Chenkov spent nearly 2 full days operating from Kappa 17 alongside rotating reconnaissance personnel. Conditions there bordered upon suicidal. Wind exposure near the upper observation platforms regularly reached levels capable of physically displacing unsecured personnel from external catwalks. Frost formed inside rebreather systems. Weapon mechanisms froze continuously despite constant maintenance. Several observation crew members suffered partial blindness after prolonged exposure to reflected ice glare during daylight cycles. Yet Chenkov continued requesting assignment extensions. "He likes the quiet," Jurgson remarked once, while cleaning the autocannon feed assembly inside the bunker chamber. Kallus glanced toward him. "The quiet?" Jurgson nodded. "Only place where nobody talks." Despite the grim humor, Kappa 17 proved invaluable. Chenkov's reconnaissance reports revealed several important environmental patterns affecting enemy movement. The Drukhari avoided certain frozen transit corridors during peak storm cycles, likely due to unstable ice formations surrounding buried plasma conduits beneath the snowfields. Other sectors displayed repeated movement signatures, suggesting established infiltration routes hidden beneath refinery ruins. Most importantly, Chenkov identified irregular thermal fluctuations originating beneath abandoned coolant trenches northwest of Theta-Nine. Underground activity. Combat engineers later confirmed portions of the trench systems connected directly into maintenance tunnels extending beneath the outer defensive perimeter. Petrovich responded immediately. Sophia Russa received orders to prepare demolition charges throughout the northern tunnel access points, while Valena Gray coordinated evacuation routes for nearby personnel in case controlled collapses destabilized surrounding infrastructure. Baru assisted engineering teams by physically relocating collapsed support beams blocking access to lower maintenance corridors. The Ogryn performed such tasks without complaint, despite worsening environmental conditions. By then, even Valhallan veterans had begun displaying physical exhaustion. Sleep cycles deteriorated rapidly across Theta-Nine due to continuous combat alerts and severe cold exposure. Heating systems failed regularly. Frozen lubricant shortages affected weapon reliability throughout multiple trench sectors. Medical stations reported increasing cases of respiratory damage caused by prolonged inhalation of chemically contaminated snow particles, generated from refinery exhaust mixing with storm systems. Food quality also declined noticeably. Monitorum supply routes from southern Hive sectors experienced repeated ambushes beyond the perimeter. Surviving convoy crews described attacks occurring without warning inside total whiteout conditions. Vehicles disappeared from formation silently. Entire transports were found, later abandoned with crews missing entirely. No bodies, only blood. Kallus observed morale weakening gradually across the defensive network despite the discipline maintained by Valhallan command structures. Soldiers no longer discussed eventual victory openly. Instead, conversations centered around endurance calculations, ammunition reserves, remaining fuel, estimated reinforcement arrival times. The Iron Hands had not yet arrived. That absence weighed heavily upon many personnel. Astartes' reinforcement requests had been transmitted repeatedly through astropathic channels since the opening raids began. Rumors spread constantly regarding fleet delays, orbital combat, or complete communication failure between Glaciem Primus and nearby Imperial sectors. Some guardsmen believed reinforcements would never arrive at all. Kallus suppressed such discussions aggressively whenever overheard. Still, uncertainty continued, spreading beneath the surface. The environment itself amplified psychological deterioration. The northern Hive outskirts possessed a uniquely oppressive geography even before the invasion began. Endless industrial architecture stretched across the frozen wastelands in all directions. Towering refinery structures blocked natural light. Cargo rails groaned constantly overhead beneath shifting ice pressure. Broken pipelines leaked chemically tainted steam across ruined labor districts, while distant machinery echoed through the storm like mechanical animal calls. At night, visibility collapsed almost entirely beyond defensive floodlights. The storm reflected sound unpredictably across the terrain. Voices carried strange distances. Gunfire echoes distorted directionality. Soldiers frequently reported hearing footsteps or movement beyond the trenches, only to discover empty snowfields moments later. Sometimes they discovered tracks. Sometimes they did not. Petrovich adapted his defensive strategy accordingly. Rather than concentrating forces exclusively along the trench lines, he organized overlapping internal fallback zones throughout Theta-Nine itself. Heavy weapon positions rotated constantly to prevent predictable targeting patterns. Patrol teams varied routes every deployment cycle. Defensive floodlights remained deliberately inconsistent during certain hours to reduce enemy observation accuracy. Sophia Russa reinforced critical structures with demolition traps designed to deny enemy infiltration through captured positions. Kallus approved all measures immediately. The Commissar had begun recognizing a fundamental tactical truth regarding the Drukhari presence. Conventional Imperial warfare doctrine assumed enemy forces sought territorial dominance or infrastructure destruction. The Drukhari appeared motivated differently. They wanted vulnerability. Fear mattered strategically. Isolation mattered more. The realization became clearer after Kallus accompanied Chenkov during a reconnaissance patrol through the outer refinery ruins 3 days after the initial engagement. The patrol consisted only of Kallus, Chenkov, and 2 additional Valhallan scouts, moving through partially buried industrial corridors northwest of Theta-Nine. Wind conditions remained severe enough that visibility fluctuated constantly between several meters and near total blindness. Ice accumulation coated every surface. Massive refinery pipes crossed overhead like frozen arteries, while abandoned machinery protruded from the snowfields beneath layers of industrial frost. Movement required absolute concentration. One wrong step could drop a soldier through hidden maintenance shafts buried beneath the ice. Chenkov navigated confidently regardless. The marksman carried no visible fear while advancing through the wasteland. He paused frequently to examine snow displacement patterns, structural damage, and ice fractures invisible to less experienced personnel. Several times, he redirected the patrol moments before unstable surfaces collapsed beneath accumulated weight. Kallus realized quickly that Valhallans treated terrain analysis almost instinctively. Approximately 2 kilometers beyond the perimeter, the patrol reached an abandoned loading sector positioned beside a frozen coolant river partially concealed beneath drifting snow. Cargo cranes loomed overhead through the storm, while shattered transport containers littered the surrounding area. At first glance, the district appeared abandoned. Then Chenkov stopped moving entirely. Kallus followed his gaze downward. Tracks, not human. Long, narrow indentations crossed the snowfield between cargo wreckage before disappearing beneath a collapsed transit platform nearby. The pattern suggested multiple lightly armored figures moving rapidly through the area within recent hours. One of the scouts whispered quietly. "Too clean?" Kallus understood immediately. The tracks displayed no hesitation, no wasted movement, no environmental struggle despite the storm intensity. Whatever created them navigated the terrain effortlessly. Chenkov raised one gloved hand suddenly. Silence. The wind continued screaming through the refinery structures overhead, while snow lashed against armor plating. For several seconds, Kallus heard nothing unusual. Then came faint metallic sounds somewhere ahead. Movement, not machinery. Controlled movement. The patrol withdrew immediately, without engagement. Back at Theta-Nine, Chenkov updated the tactical maps personally, while Petrovich reviewed the reconnaissance findings beside him. The Drukhari were establishing operational pathways through the outer industrial ruins, while avoiding direct confrontation, unless advantageous. They understood the terrain increasingly well, possibly better than the defenders themselves. That realization altered several strategic assumptions across the northern command structure. Colonel Vare ordered reinforcement of all underground access routes surrounding refinery sector Epsilon 7. Additional minefields were deployed across exposed approach corridors. Heavy weapons crews received authorization to destroy abandoned infrastructure suspected of concealing infiltration points. Yet, despite these preparations, Kallus sensed the defensive line weakening incrementally. Not physically, psychologically. The storm removed predictability from warfare. Soldiers could not observe approaching threats reliably. Defensive victories remained difficult to confirm. Enemy casualties were rarely recovered. Every patrol beyond the perimeter risked disappearance inside the whiteout conditions consuming the northern wasteland. The Drukhari exploited that uncertainty constantly. And somewhere beyond the storm, they were still preparing for something larger. The first sustained engagement between the defenders of Theta-Nine and the Drukhari began during the 8th night of northern deployment. Unlike the earlier probing attacks, this assault demonstrated clear coordination across multiple sectors simultaneously. Vox traffic flooded immediately with overlapping distress calls, artillery requests, casualty reports, and fragmented sightings emerging through the storm. Commissar Rashir Kallus remembered the exact moment the attack began because the wind changed first. The screaming pressure fronts that normally consumed the refinery districts weakened suddenly across the northern perimeter. Snowfall remained heavy, but the violent turbulence that had masked long-range sound for days diminished without warning. For several seconds, the industrial outskirts became unnaturally quiet beneath the darkness. Then the outer minefields detonated. Multiple explosions erupted almost simultaneously northwest of Theta-Nine, illuminating the storm in brief white flashes. Defensive sirens activated immediately across the trench networks, while heavy bolter crews rushed toward prepared firing positions. Kallus emerged from the command bunker alongside Petrovich's squad. just as secondary detonations shook the refinery avenues beyond the perimeter. This time, the enemy did not disappear after initial contact. They kept advancing. Floodlights activated across the northern trench lines, casting pale illumination through the snowfields beyond the barricades. At first, the defenders saw only movement, vast shadows weaving through industrial debris and frozen trench wreckage with impossible speed. Then, the first Drukhari warriors entered direct visual range. Kallus understood immediately why so many survivors described them with visible dread. The Xenos moved unlike conventional soldiers. Human infantry advanced through terrain by controlling balance, conserving momentum, and compensating for environmental resistance. The Drukhari appeared untouched by such limitations. They sprinted across ice-covered surfaces without slipping. They vaulted debris and trench barriers with predatory fluidity. Their movements resembled hunting animals more than organized infantry formations. Tall armored figures emerged through the storm wearing segmented black armor layered with sharp, overlapping plates reflecting blue light from the refinery towers overhead. Many carried elongated helmets or bare, pale faces marked by ritual scarring and cruelly sharpened features. Their physiques appeared unnaturally lean, almost fragile at first glance, yet every movement revealed controlled physical precision far beyond human capability. Several Drukhari advanced, carrying splinter rifles, emitting streams of crystalline ammunition that shattered upon impact with armor and flesh alike. Others wielded bladed weapons energized by flickering blue power fields. Kallus observed one Xenos warrior leap directly over a trench barricade before decapitating a guardsman with a single curved strike while still moving forward. The speed of the kill stunned nearby defenders momentarily. That hesitation cost lives immediately. Additional Drukhari poured through the breach behind the first attacker, while splinter fire tore across the trench lines. Human screams mixed with the constant roar of autocannon fire and exploding munitions as the northern perimeter descended into close-quarters combat beneath the storm. Ferik Jurgson stabilized the defensive line first. The Valhallan heavy gunner opened fire with the autocannon from an elevated trench platform overlooking the breach corridor. Explosive rounds ripped through the advancing Drukhari formations, vaporizing ice and shattered armor across the snowfields beyond the barricades. Several Xenus collapsed instantly beneath concentrated firepower, while nearby attackers scattered unnaturally fast to avoid the kill zone. "They learn quick," Jurgson growled, while feeding additional ammunition belts into the weapon assembly. Sophia Russa activated secondary demolition charges moments later. Pre-positioned explosives detonated beneath collapsed refinery supports, surrounding the northern approach corridors, burying portions of the battlefield beneath avalanches of steel debris and frozen icecrete. Entire pathways disappeared instantly beneath collapsing industrial wreckage. Still, the Drukhari kept advancing. Kallus drew his bolt pistol while moving alongside Petrovich through the trench network toward the heaviest fighting. Guardsmen throughout Theta-Nine fired continuously into the storm, while Medici personnel dragged wounded soldiers toward underground bunkers beneath constant incoming fire. Vox communication deteriorated rapidly as multiple trench sectors reported simultaneous infiltration attempts beyond the main assault corridor. The enemy attacked everywhere at once. That realization became horrifyingly clear when Kallus witnessed the first skimmer assault. Dark shapes emerged suddenly from above the refinery towers overhead, descending through the storm with almost complete silence. Sleek anti-gravitic craft streaked low across the battlefield between industrial structures, while mounted weapon systems unleashed concentrated energy fire directly into defensive positions below. Several heavy bolter nests vanished beneath the bombardment instantly. One skimmer passed directly above Kallus's position, close enough for him to observe the crew clearly. The Drukhari aboard wore armor decorated with trophies: human bones, flayed skin, severed hands mounted along the hull plating like ritual ornaments. One of the Xenos laughed audibly while firing into the trenches below. Not shouting, laughing. Kallus fired his bolt pistol upward instinctively as the craft passed overhead. The explosive round struck the rear armor plating without noticeable effect before the skimmer disappeared back into the storm behind the refinery towers. Nearby, Baru roared with visible fury while opening fire toward additional incoming craft. The Ogryn's Ripper gun thundered across the battlefield with devastating force, shredding portions of one skimmer's stabilizer assembly during a low attack run. The damaged craft spiraled sideways before colliding violently against a refinery support tower several hundred meters away. The resulting explosion illuminated the battlefield briefly. That light revealed the true scale of the assault. Drukhari forces had breached multiple defensive sectors simultaneously across Theta-Nine. Small elite raiding groups moved through the trench systems, targeting officers, heavy weapon crews, Vox operators, and medici stations with terrifying efficiency. They ignored heavily defended positions whenever possible, preferring instead to isolate weaker sections before overwhelming them through speed and shock violence. Several guardsmen broke formation entirely after witnessing the close-quarters attacks. Kallus executed one himself. The Commissar shot the fleeing trooper through the back of the skull while advancing toward the northern barricades beside Petrovich. The execution stabilized nearby defenders immediately. Valhallans resumed firing positions without hesitation, despite the mounting casualties around them. Petrovich never commented on the action. The sergeant focused entirely upon battlefield control. "Gray," he barked through the Vox channel. "Report western trenches." Static answered briefly before Valena Gray's voice emerged through the interference. "Western sectors holding. Casualties moderate. South barricade breached for less than 2 minutes before containment." "Chenkov?" "Still operating from Kappa 17. Kallus frowned. The observation tower had become dangerously exposed during the assault. Before he could speak, Chenkov's voice interrupted the channel directly. "More incoming. No panic, no urgency, only certainty." Seconds later, the defenders saw them. Additional Drukhari forces advanced through the storm beyond the outer minefields, alongside larger constructs moving between the refinery ruins. The creatures resembled elongated mechanical predators assembled from black metal, exposed blades, and twitching cybernetic limbs. Their movement patterns appeared violently unstable, shifting between quadrupedal and upright locomotion, while closing toward the trenches at alarming speed. Several guardsmen hesitated visibly upon seeing them. Kallus understood why. The constructs did not resemble military equipment. They resembled torture devices, given mobility. "Target the machines first," Petrovich ordered immediately. Jurgson redirected the autocannon toward the advancing constructs, while Russa prepared additional anti-armor charges along the trench intersections ahead. Heavy weapons fire hammered the leading machine repeatedly as it crossed the snowfield, explosive rounds tearing away armor plating and severing mechanical limbs. The construct kept moving anyway. Only after concentrated fire destroyed the central torso assembly did the machine finally collapse into the ice. The Drukhari exploited every second of distraction. Multiple raiders breached the eastern trench lines moments later, engaging guardsmen in brutal close quarters, fighting beneath the storm. Kallus witnessed one Valhallan dragged screaming over the barricades by hooked chains before vanishing into the darkness beyond the perimeter. Another soldier collapsed beside the trench wall after crystalline ammunition embedded throughout his exposed throat and chest. The splinter rounds caused horrific injuries. Victims rarely died immediately. Valena Gray later described the ammunition as chemically engineered for maximum nervous system trauma. Wounded personnel experienced full-body convulsions, hallucinations, and organ failure within minutes of exposure, even from relatively minor wounds. Medicare's teams quickly exhausted available pain suppressants. The fighting continued for nearly 3 continuous hours. By then, the northern trenches had become slaughter corridors, illuminated only by emergency floodlights, muzzle flashes, and burning refinery debris scattered throughout the battlefield. Snow turned black with soot and blood beneath the defenders' boots. Bodies froze where they fell. Still, Theta-Nine held? Barely. Kallus eventually regrouped alongside Petrovich near the central command trench after helping repel another infiltration attempt along the western barricades. Both men were coated in frost, blood, and industrial ash beneath their winter armor. "What are they waiting for?" Kallus asked quietly over the distant gunfire. Petrovich understood the question instantly. The Drukhari possessed sufficient speed and mobility to continue escalating the assault aggressively. Instead, they attacked in cycles. Withdrawals followed breakthroughs. Kill zones shifted unpredictably. Captured personnel disappeared into the storm rather than being executed openly. The sergeant stared into the darkness beyond the perimeter. "They are harvesting us." Kallus said nothing, because he knew Petrovich was correct. The realization settled across the battlefield slowly as dawn approached behind the storm clouds. The Drukhari assault had not targeted infrastructure destruction primarily. They attacked communication hubs, isolated defensive sectors, and vulnerable personnel concentrations while extracting captives whenever possible. Terror itself formed part of the operation. When the surviving raiders finally withdrew back into the frozen wasteland shortly before daylight cycle, Theta-Nine remained under Imperial control. But the defensive corridor no longer felt secure. The Drukhari had crossed the trenches. They had entered the line, and every guardsman stationed within the northern perimeter now understood exactly what waited beyond the storm. The aftermath of the assault exposed the true condition of Theta-Nine more clearly than any tactical report transmitted to regimental command. By the beginning of the next operational cycle, the northern defensive corridor remained technically functional, but only through constant emergency repair efforts conducted beneath worsening environmental conditions. Entire trench sectors had partially collapsed during the fighting. Heavy weapon emplacements burned continuously beside frozen barricades, while Medici personnel moved through the defensive lines, collecting bodies buried beneath drifting snow. The storm never stopped. It howled across the battlefield with the same indifferent violence as before, gradually covering bloodstains, corpses, shell impacts, and destroyed fortifications beneath fresh layers of ice. Commissar Rashir Kallus began the casualty review shortly after 0800 local time inside the lower command chamber beneath Theta-Nine. The room smelled heavily of burned insulation, blood, promethium smoke, and chemical sterilizers. Vox operators worked without pause, attempting to re-establish stable communications with neighboring sectors, while exhausted engineers updated structural integrity projections across damaged refinery districts. The numbers arriving through the reports were severe. Roughly 40% of the northern perimeter personnel had been killed, wounded, or listed missing following the engagement. Missing personnel concerned command staff more than confirmed deaths. Multiple squads vanished entirely during the close-quarters breaches, without recoverable remains. Some defensive positions were discovered abandoned, despite showing clear signs of violent combat. Others contained only blood. Valena Gray handled most of the casualty processing personally. Her uniform sleeves remained stained dark red, nearly to the elbows, while her eyes showed visible signs of stimulant exhaustion. Despite that, she continued organizing supply manifests and treatment priorities with mechanical precision. Kallus reviewed the updated inventories beside her, while nearby Medici staff operated continuously on wounded guardsmen laid across reinforced cargo tables. "Medical reserves?" Kallus asked. Gray did not immediately answer. She finished updating one casualty ledger before speaking. 37% remaining on combat stimulants. 21% remaining on synthetic clotting compounds. We are critically low on antitoxin treatment. Kallus looked toward her. The splinter ammunition. Gray nodded once. We cannot treat every exposure anymore. That statement carried obvious implications. Severely wounded personnel struck by splinter fire would no longer receive full medical intervention unless operationally valuable. Prioritization protocols had already begun. Kallus understood the necessity. He disliked hearing it spoken aloud. Nearby, Petrovich conducted separate assessments regarding ammunition and defensive readiness alongside Ferik Jurgson and Sophia Russa. The previous night's engagement consumed enormous quantities of heavy weapon ammunition across Theta-Nine. Several autocannon crews exhausted nearly their entire reserve stockpiles during the prolonged fighting, while missile launcher inventories had dropped below acceptable defensive thresholds. Jurgson summarized the situation bluntly. If they attack like that again tonight, heavy weapons go dry halfway through. Sophia Russa adjusted one of the demolition detonators spread across the nearby table while reviewing updated trench maps. Then they cannot breach the trenches again. Petrovich glanced toward her. You still have enough charges? Enough to bury half the northern corridor if necessary. Kallus noticed she spoke without hesitation. The young Valhallan no longer displayed the restless tension present during earlier deployment stages. Exposure to sustained combat appeared to have sharpened her focus rather than destabilized it. Her movements remained controlled and efficient, while discussing structural demolition points, fallback barriers, and tunnel collapse projections throughout the northern perimeter. The same change had occurred across much of the surviving squad. The initial uncertainty surrounding the Drukhari had vanished. Now the defenders understood exactly what kind of enemy they faced. That understanding brought clarity, but not comfort. Dimir Chenkov returned from Kappa 17 shortly after midday, following nearly 30 consecutive hours operating within the observation tower. Frost-coated portions of his outer armor, while ice crystals covered the edges of his rebreather mask. One side of his face showed visible cold damage beneath partially thawed skin, though he ignored it entirely while delivering updated reconnaissance findings. The enemy established movement corridors northwest of the coolant trenches, he reported calmly. 3 confirmed skimmer pathways. Additional underground access, likely beneath refinery sectors, Delta and Kappa. Petrovich studied the updated maps carefully. Numbers? Unknown. More than last night. Silence settled briefly across the chamber. Not fear, calculation. Kallus reviewed the surrounding personnel, while Chenkov continued describing enemy movement patterns beyond the perimeter. The surviving Valhallans no longer reacted emotionally to casualty figures or tactical projections. Fatigue had reduced many conversations into stripped operational exchanges, focused purely upon survival and defensive maintenance. Even Baru appeared quieter than before. The Ogryn sat near the rear heating unit, cleaning blood and frozen debris from his Ripper gun beneath Valena Gray's supervision. Extensive damage covered portions of his armor plating following the previous night's fighting. Deep splinter impacts remained embedded across the left shoulder assembly, while one gauntlet mechanism no longer functioned properly. Gray eventually approached Kallus privately after completing additional treatment rotations. Baru suffered internal injuries during the breach fighting, she said quietly. Kallus looked toward the Ogryn immediately. He reported nothing. He would not. Kallus understood. Baru's loyalty to the squad bordered upon absolute devotion. The Ogryn routinely concealed injuries to remain operational beside Petrovich and the others. Gray estimated fractured ribs, significant tissue trauma, and possible organ damage based upon her examination. He still insists on frontline deployment, she added. Petrovich overheard the conversation from across the chamber. He stays with us. Gray frowned immediately. He needs recovery time. We all do. Neither argued further. Outside the bunker, recovery operations continued throughout the defensive corridor, while the storm intensified once more across the northern outskirts. Guardsmen reinforced collapsed barricades, using frozen corpses as temporary structural supports where necessary. Damaged trenches were widened into secondary firing positions. Automated turrets received emergency repairs despite limited replacement components. The battlefield itself changed shape continuously beneath the weather. Entire sections of the previous night's fighting disappeared beneath drifting snow by late afternoon. Burned wreckage froze solid within hours. Ice gradually covered blood pools, shell impacts, and severed limbs until the northern perimeter resembled a graveyard hidden beneath white silence. Kallus accompanied Petrovich during another inspection of the outer trench sectors shortly before nightfall. The defenders moved carefully through narrow ice corridors between reinforced barricades, while nearby personnel maintained firing readiness toward the store beyond the perimeter. Exhaustion showed visibly throughout the defensive line. Guardsmen leaned against trench walls whenever inactive longer than several seconds. Many displayed untreated wounds beneath frozen uniforms due to medikit shortages. Yet discipline remained intact. That alone impressed Kallus profoundly. Under comparable circumstances, many Imperial regiments would already have fractured psychologically. The Valhallans endured because endurance itself formed part of their identity. Cold, hunger, exhaustion, and prolonged attritional warfare were not exceptional experiences for them. They were expected experiences. Still, even Valhallans had limits. The Commissar noticed increasing silence along the trenches. Fewer conversations, fewer complaints. Soldiers no longer discussed home worlds, transfer requests, or survival odds. Most simply focused on immediate tasks while staring into the storm beyond the floodlights. Waiting. Petrovich eventually stopped near one of the northern barricades overlooking the refinery ruins beyond Theta-Nine. Floodlights illuminated swirling snow and distant industrial towers partially obscured behind the blizzard. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the Drukhari remained active, watching. Kallus spoke quietly. "You think they attack again tonight?" Petrovich adjusted the grip on his laser gun while studying the storm. "Yes. Another probe?" The sergeant shook his head once. "No, something larger." Kallus remained silent for several seconds before responding. "The line may not survive another full breach." Petrovich nodded calmly. "I know." No panic accompanied the statement. Only acceptance. Further south within the command network, Colonel Vare transmitted updated operational directives across the northern sectors shortly afterward. Imperial command no longer viewed Theta-Nine as a temporary holding action. The corridor had become the primary barrier, preventing enemy penetration toward the central thermal infrastructure, sustaining millions deeper within the Hive. The mission objective, therefore, remained unchanged. Hold the northern perimeter, delay enemy advancement, preserve refinery sector Epsilon 7 at all costs until reinforcement arrival. Nothing else mattered. Additional orders authorized full structural demolition of outer industrial sectors if breach conditions became unrecoverable. Russa reviewed the demolition authority carefully after receiving the transmission. "If they overrun Theta-Nine," she said quietly, "we collapse the refinery corridors behind us." Jurgson looked toward her. "That kills anyone still fighting out there. It also buries the enemy advance." No one disagreed. Night returned gradually across the frozen Hive outskirts, while defensive preparations intensified throughout the corridor. Ammunition was redistributed. Firing positions rotated. Minefields expanded deeper into the refinery approaches. Chenkov returned to Kappa 17, despite Gray's objections regarding his worsening cold exposure injuries. Baru accompanied Petrovich personally along the northern trench sectors, carrying ammunition crates almost as large as human soldiers. Kallus spent the final hours before darkness inspecting morale among the remaining defenders. He expected fear. Instead, he found concentration. The surviving guardsmen understood the situation fully now. The Drukhari would continue attacking until the line broke or reinforcements arrived. Escape routes no longer existed. Withdrawal orders would never come. So the Valhallans prepared to stand. Toward the end of the inspection cycle, Kallus paused briefly beside one exhausted young trooper reinforcing a damaged firing position with frozen sandbags. The soldier looked barely old enough for active deployment. "Name?" Kallus asked. "Trooper Mikhail, sir." The Commissar studied him carefully. The young guardsman's hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, while fresh frostbite darkened portions of his exposed cheek beneath damaged goggles. Yet he continued working. Kallus looked out toward the storm beyond the barricades. "Do you understand the objective here, Trooper?" Mikhail swallowed once before answering. "Hold until relief arrives." Kallus nodded slowly. "Yes." The young soldier hesitated briefly before speaking again. "Do you think they're really coming, sir?" The Commissar stared into the darkness for several seconds. Far beyond the storm, hidden somewhere beyond the frozen wastelands, the Iron Hands fleet was supposed to be advancing toward Glaciem Primus. Supposed to be. Kallus finally answered without turning around. "They will come." Whether he truly believed it anymore, even he could no longer tell. The final assault against Theta-Nine began less than 4 hours after nightfall. No warning preceded it. No reconnaissance strikes. No probing attacks against the perimeter. The Drukhari came through the storm in full force beneath complete atmospheric blackout conditions, while refinery sector generators failed simultaneously across multiple districts. Floodlights died throughout the northern defensive corridor within seconds. Vox channels collapsed beneath violent static interference. Automated turret systems lost targeting synchronization almost immediately after the power failure began. Then the bombardment started. Dark matter projectiles struck the outer trench lines with catastrophic force, vaporizing barricades and collapsing entire defensive sectors beneath explosions unlike conventional Imperial artillery. The impacts produced almost no sound initially. Matter simply disappeared where the projectiles landed. Ice, steel, bodies, and reinforced fortifications dissolved into expanding black distortions before secondary shockwaves tore through the surrounding trenches. Commissar Rashir Kallus was thrown against a bunker wall during the first impacts. Emergency lighting activated throughout the underground corridors moments later, while alarms screamed across the defensive network above. Dust, ice, and smoke filled the bunker chambers as nearby personnel rushed toward combat positions through partially collapsed passageways. Petrovich reached the central command table first. "Reports." Static answered him initially. Then fragmented transmissions flooded the chamber simultaneously. Eastern trench collapse. Skimmers inside the perimeter. Generator station lost. Multiple breaches. The entire northern corridor was under attack at once. Kallus drew his bolt pistol while following Petrovich and the squad toward the surface access tunnels. The ground shook continuously beneath incoming bombardment overhead. Several corridors already burned from ruptured fuel lines, while wounded guardsmen staggered toward medici stations deeper inside the bunker network. Valena Gray moved among them briefly, issuing triage orders before rejoining the squad without hesitation. The situation outside had already deteriorated beyond anything witnessed during the previous assault. Large portions of Theta-Nine no longer existed. Entire trench systems had collapsed beneath concentrated bombardment, while refinery fires illuminated the storm with burning orange light across the northern horizon. Defensive barricades lay shattered beneath snow and debris. Dead guardsmen covered the firing lines alongside destroyed heavy weapons and overturned ammunition sleds. The Drukhari had penetrated deep into the corridor. Kallus saw them immediately. Raiding forces moved through the trenches in coordinated assault formations, while skimmer craft strafed surviving defenders from above. Several larger transport vessels hovered beyond the perimeter, releasing additional infantry directly into the refinery ruins surrounding Theta-Nine. This was no longer a raid. It was invasion. Petrovich reacted instantly. Jurgson, western barricades. Russa with me. Gray maintain bunker access. Baru forward. Orders spread across the surviving defenders immediately, while the Valhallans rushed toward critical breach sectors beneath heavy incoming fire. Kallus followed beside Petrovich through the collapsing trench lines, while splinter rounds shattered against the icecrete walls surrounding them. The enemy pressure felt entirely different this time. Relentless. The Drukhari no longer attacked in cycles before withdrawing. They advanced continuously through every available corridor, while targeting command positions, bunker entrances, and communication hubs with precise coordination. Human defenders, who became isolated, disappeared almost immediately beneath concentrated assaults. Kallus witnessed one northern firing line collapse entirely within less than a minute after enemy skimmers breached the barricades overhead. The screams carried through the storm even above the bombardment. Petrovich led the counterattack personally. The Valhallan sergeant regrouped surviving infantry near a partially destroyed coolant trench intersection, overlooking one of the main refinery approach corridors. Approximately 30 guardsmen remained operational there, alongside Jurgson's autocannon position, and several damaged heavy bolter emplacements still capable of firing. Beyond the barricades, Drukhari forces advanced through the storm between burning industrial structures. Sophia Russa activated demolition charges without waiting for further instruction. Massive explosions tore through the refinery avenues north of Theta-Nine as pre-positioned explosives collapsed elevated cargo rails and buried several enemy assault paths beneath avalanches of steel and ice. Entire sections of the battlefield vanished beneath falling industrial wreckage. For several minutes, the advance slowed. Then the enemy adapted again. Drukhari skimmer craft began transporting assault teams directly over the collapsed sectors, while additional infantry emerged through underground maintenance corridors previously believed sealed beneath the ice. "They're underneath us," Chenkov reported through the Vox from Kappa 17. Multiple contacts inside the tunnel network. Petrovich swore quietly. Kallus immediately understood the implication. Theta-Nine could no longer hold through static defense alone. The Drukhari had infiltrated the perimeter completely. If the underground tunnel systems remained active, enemy forces would continue appearing behind the defensive lines indefinitely. The mission objective changed instantly. Containment became impossible. Delay became everything. Petrovich redirected surviving personnel toward the refinery choke points, protecting access to Plasma Complex Epsilon 7 farther south. Those structures represented the final operational thermal processors maintaining stable heat distribution across the central hive districts. If the Drukhari captured or destroyed them, millions of civilians deeper within Glaciem Primus would freeze during the coming weeks. The Valhallans prepared to die protecting those generators. Kallus recognized that truth clearly as they repositioned through the burning trench systems beneath continuous attack. No one discussed retreat. No one requested evacuation. The surviving defenders simply moved where ordered, while the battlefield collapsed around them. Baru became critical during the withdrawal operations. The Ogryn physically carried wounded personnel through collapsed corridors, while using his massive Ripper gun to suppress advancing Drukhari forces behind the regrouping infantry. Several times, Kallus witnessed Baru stand directly in open firing lanes, absorbing incoming splinter fire simply to allow smaller guardsmen time to reposition. One splinter round penetrated the Ogryn's upper shoulder during the retreat toward Epsilon 7. Baru barely reacted. The wound would likely have killed a normal human instantly. Instead, the Ogryn continued firing. The final defensive line formed around the outer thermal generator district, shortly before 0300 local time. The battlefield there differed drastically from the shattered trenches farther north. Massive plasma cooling towers surrounded the refinery sector, while elevated maintenance platforms crossed overhead between heavily armored reactor structures. Steam vents erupted constantly through the storm, creating shifting walls of heated fog and condensed frost across the industrial avenues. Visibility became even worse. Yet the terrain offered advantages. Narrow approach corridors limited enemy mobility, while the heavy industrial architecture reduced skimmer effectiveness within close quarters. Petrovich organized surviving defenders accordingly, positioning heavy weapons to create overlapping kill zones through the refinery approaches, while Russa prepared the final demolition charges surrounding the thermal processors themselves. Kallus reviewed the remaining force strength beside Valena Gray, near one of the generator bunkers. The numbers were devastating. Less than half the original Theta-Nine defenders remained combat-capable. Many were wounded. Ammunition reserves had dropped critically low. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Even the Valhallans showed visible strain now, faces hollowed by exhaustion, movements slowed by accumulated injuries and cold exposure. Still, they held position. Kallus moved through the defensive lines personally during the final preparations. Guardsmen crouched beside heavy bolters and firing barricades, while refinery fires reflected across frost-covered armor plates. Nearby, engineers rigged emergency plasma overload systems in case total destruction of the thermal district became necessary. The Commissar stopped briefly beside Sophia Russa, while she armed the final demolition network. "If they breach this line?" he asked. Russa kept working. "Then I collapse the processors. That kills everyone here." She finally looked toward him. Yes. No emotion accompanied the response. Only acceptance. The Drukhari assault resumed less than 20 minutes later. This time, they attacked directly through the refinery avenues beneath concentrated skimmer support and continuous suppressive fire. Splinter rounds and dark matter projectiles tore through the industrial structures surrounding the defensive line, while Drukhari infantry advanced through steam clouds and drifting snow with terrifying speed. The battle for Epsilon 7 became close-range slaughter almost immediately. Heavy bolters roared across the refinery corridors, while autocannon fire shattered advancing skimmers between the cooling towers overhead. Drukhari warriors vaulted industrial machinery and maintenance rails, while engaging defenders at near point-blank range inside the smoke-filled generator sectors. Kallus killed 2 himself during the opening breach. The first died beneath a bolt round through the chest, while attempting to flank a wounded guardsman beside the coolant pipes. The second reached melee range before Kallus drove a chain sword directly through the Xenos' throat beneath its segmented armor plating. Even dying, the creature smiled at him. The fighting intensified further. Baru tore one Drukhari warrior apart physically after the Xenos attempted attacking Valena Gray near the Medicae station entrance. Jurgson continued operating the autocannon despite severe shrapnel wounds across his left arm. Chenkov abandoned Kappa 17 entirely, once enemy skimmers destroyed the observation tower, joining the refinery defense directly with sniper fire from elevated maintenance platforms overhead. Petrovich remained everywhere simultaneously. The sergeant moved through the defensive lines, reinforcing collapsing positions, redistributing ammunition, and directing counterattacks wherever the enemy pressure became strongest. Kallus realized the remaining guardsmen no longer fought because of orders alone. They fought because Petrovich was still standing beside them. Then the generators began failing. Warning sirens echoed throughout Epsilon 7 as overload alerts activated across the thermal processing network. Several cooling towers already burned from enemy bombardment, while unstable plasma surges shook portions of the refinery district violently beneath the fighting. If the processors exploded, the entire sector would vanish. Russa received the alert transmission first. "We have minutes," she shouted through the vox. Petrovich answered immediately. "Can you stabilize them?" "No." Silence followed briefly beneath the battle noise. Then Petrovich issued the only remaining order possible. "Prepare the evacuation routes." The mission objective had changed again. Now the defenders needed to survive long enough to withdraw the remaining personnel before Epsilon 7 detonated around them. The withdrawal from refinery sector Epsilon 7 began under total structural failure conditions. By the time Petrovich issued the evacuation order, large portions of the thermal district had already entered irreversible overload. Plasma coolant systems ruptured throughout the refinery complex, while secondary explosions shook the industrial foundations beneath the defenders' feet. Entire maintenance corridors collapsed behind advancing fires. Steam pressure vents erupted randomly through fractured pipes, flooding sections of the battlefield with superheated vapor hot enough to strip flesh from exposed skin despite the surrounding sub-zero environment. The storm outside intensified further. Snow and ash mixed together across the refinery sectors until visibility dropped below several meters, even beneath emergency lighting. Burning coolant illuminated the darkness with unnatural blue light, reflecting through drifting steam clouds and shattered industrial towers overhead. Commissar Rashir Kallus understood immediately that organized extraction would be nearly impossible. Too many wounded. Too little time. Too few surviving personnel. Yet the Valhallans continued functioning with remarkable control despite the collapse unfolding around them. Petrovich divided the survivors into rotating fallback groups, moving southward through interconnected refinery corridors towards secondary evacuation routes, leading deeper into Hive Glaciem Primus. The primary northern transit roads had already become unusable after sustained bombardment destroyed most armored access paths during the battle for Theta-Nine. That forced the defenders underground. The maintenance tunnel networks beneath Epsilon 7 represented the only remaining extraction corridor still accessible through the refinery district. Unfortunately, many of those tunnels also connected directly to the same infiltration pathways previously exploited by the Drukhari. The enemy understood the terrain now, possibly better than the defenders themselves. Sophia Russa armed the refinery demolition sequence personally before joining the retreating column near the southern generator tunnels. Her uniform showed heavy blast damage across one shoulder, while blood from a partially sealed splinter froze along the outer layers of her thermal coat. Valena Gray noticed the injury immediately. "You're hit." Still moving, Gray reached for additional antitoxin treatment before stopping herself halfway through the motion. There was none left. The medic understood the situation without speaking further. The group descended into the tunnel systems shortly afterward. The underground maintenance network beneath Epsilon 7 resembled a buried industrial labyrinth, extending for kilometers beneath the frozen refinery districts. Massive coolant pipes lined the walls alongside generator conduits, pressure systems, and ancient transit rails partially buried beneath accumulated frost. Emergency lighting flickered inconsistently through the corridors, while freezing condensation coated every surface with thin layers of ice. The tunnels were warmer than the surface. That made them more dangerous. Steam clouds reduced visibility even further, while every sound echoed unpredictably through the enclosed passageways. Weapon fire, footsteps, machinery vibrations, and distant structural collapses blended together into constant mechanical noise reverberating throughout the underground network. Kallus moved beside Petrovich near the front of the withdrawal column, while Chenkov scouted ahead through the darkness. Behind them, surviving guardsmen carried wounded personnel using improvised stretchers assembled from ammunition crates, pipe supports, and damaged barricade plating. Baru remained near the rear guard position, protecting the retreat from pursuing Drukhari forces. The Ogryn had begun slowing visibly. Blood trails followed portions of his movement, despite Gray's repeated attempts to stabilize his injuries. Splinter toxins affected even abhuman physiology eventually. One of Baru's eyes had swollen partially shut beneath extensive facial bruising, while his breathing grew increasingly strained through damaged rebreather systems. Still, he carried wounded soldiers whenever possible. No one asked him to. The first underground ambush occurred approximately 40 minutes into the withdrawal. Chenkov detected movement ahead moments before contact. Stop. The single word halted the column instantly. Kallus raised his bolt pistol toward the darkness ahead, while Petrovich signaled the nearest guardsmen into defensive positions along the tunnel intersections. Steam drifted slowly through the corridor beneath flickering emergency lights, while distant metallic sounds echoed somewhere deeper within the underground network. Then came the laughter. Quiet, almost conversational. Several guardsmen visibly stiffened. The sound moved strangely through the tunnels, impossible to locate precisely. It echoed from multiple directions simultaneously, while faint movement appeared briefly between the steam clouds farther ahead. Petrovich reacted first. Lights out. Emergency lamps were destroyed immediately, with concentrated las fire, plunging the corridor into near total darkness, broken only by dim red maintenance strobes farther down the tunnel network. The Drukhari attacked seconds later. Dark shapes emerged silently through the steam from elevated maintenance platforms lining the tunnel walls. Splinter fire tore into the withdrawal column, while bladed figures descended directly into the guardsmen from above with horrifying speed. The confined tunnel environment turned the engagement into chaos instantly. Lasfire illuminated fragments of movement across the darkness, while screams echoed violently through the enclosed corridors. Kallus fired repeatedly toward incoming shapes barely visible between steam clouds and muzzle flashes. One bolt round struck a Drukhari warrior directly through the torso, exploding the creature backward against a coolant pipe. Another reached melee range before Baru intercepted it physically. The Ogryn smashed the Xenos against the tunnel wall hard enough to crack reinforced metal plating beneath the impact. Nearby guardsmen regrouped around Petrovich, while Jurgson established suppressive fire down the central corridor, using short autocannon bursts to avoid tunnel collapse risks. The Drukhari withdrew quickly once resistance stabilized. That frightened Kallus more than if they had remained. The enemy no longer fought recklessly. They were slowing the retreat deliberately, buying time. The realization became clearer after Chenkov reported additional movement paralleling the withdrawal route deeper within the tunnel systems. "They're herding us," he said quietly. Petrovich already suspected it. The surviving defenders adjusted course immediately, abandoning the primary maintenance corridor in favor of secondary coolant passages leading toward older transit sectors beneath the Hive outskirts. The alternate route proved slower and significantly more hazardous structurally, but it reduced the risk of total encirclement underground. Time became the critical factor. Behind them, Epsilon 7 continued collapsing. Every few minutes, distant shockwaves rolled through the tunnel systems as additional refinery structures detonated across the northern districts. Ceiling supports groaned continuously beneath shifting pressure, while sections of the underground network flooded with freezing coolant leaking from ruptured industrial systems above. Supplies deteriorated rapidly during the movement. Power packs ran low across multiple infantry squads. Heavy weapon ammunition dropped to critical levels. Medical treatment became almost non-existent beyond emergency bandaging and stimulant injections. Several wounded personnel died during transit simply because the column could no longer stop long enough for proper stabilization. Valena Gray still recorded every death. Even then, Kallus noticed her updating casualty logs beneath flickering emergency light while walking beside the stretchers through the frozen corridors. Her hands trembled constantly now from exhaustion and chemical overuse, yet she refused to abandon the records. Petrovich eventually spoke quietly to her during one halt period. "You can stop." Gray shook her head immediately. "No." The answer ended the conversation. Hours passed beneath the Hive. The storm above remained audible even underground through distant structural vibrations echoing down the tunnel systems. Occasionally, the defenders crossed abandoned habitation sectors, partially buried beneath ice, where frozen civilian corpses still occupied collapsed shelters and maintenance stations abandoned during earlier evacuation attempts. Several bodies showed signs of Drukhari mutilation. The guardsmen stopped looking closely after a while. Fatigue became another enemy entirely. Most surviving personnel had remained awake nearly continuously since the initial assault on Theta-Nine. Physical exhaustion slowed reactions and damaged concentration, while prolonged exposure to combat stress gradually reduced even Valhallan discipline into mechanical survival behavior. Sophia Russa nearly collapsed once while arming tunnel demolition charges behind the retreating column. Kallus caught her before she hit the floor. The young demolition specialist looked at him with unfocused eyes for several seconds before forcing herself upright again. "I'm fine." She was not. None of them were. Yet the retreat continued. Eventually, the column reached Transit Junction, Sigma 4, an abandoned underground cargo station connecting the refinery maintenance network to deeper Hive transportation corridors leading toward central defensive districts still under Imperial control. Or what remained of them. The junction itself had already suffered attack damage before their arrival. burned transport vehicles littered the station platforms, while portions of the ceiling had collapsed entirely beneath previous bombardments. Emergency lights flickered weakly across frozen corpses scattered throughout the loading sectors. More importantly, the station provided the first stable Vox signal received in hours. Kallus moved immediately toward the communications relay, while Chenkov secured the surrounding platforms alongside the remaining guardsmen. Static filled the channel initially. Then a transmission finally emerged. Imperial reinforcement fleets had entered low orbit above Glaciem Primus. Multiple strike cruisers. Astartes deployment confirmed. The Iron Hands had arrived. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Not because morale suddenly recovered, but because the information felt almost unreal after everything that had happened beneath the storm. Petrovich finally looked toward Kallus. About time. The Commissar almost laughed. Almost. Then the station lights failed completely. Chenkov reacted instantly. Movement. The final engagement at Transit Junction Sigma 4 lasted less than 20 minutes. For the surviving defenders, it felt considerably longer. The station descended into darkness immediately after the emergency systems failed. Only scattered muzzle flashes and intermittent red maintenance strobes illuminated the underground loading sectors, while the storm above continued shaking dust and ice loose from the fractured ceiling supports overhead. Chenkov fired first. The Valhallan marksman dropped one advancing Drukhari warrior through the throat before the rest of the enemy force emerged from the darkness surrounding the station platforms. Splinter fire erupted across the junction simultaneously, while multiple Xenos assault teams advanced through the abandoned transit lanes from both tunnel entrances. They had anticipated the withdrawal route. Kallus realized that instantly. The Drukhari had pursued the defenders underground, not merely to destroy them, but to prevent organized extraction before Imperial reinforcements established operational control deeper within the Hive. Transit Junction Sigma 4 represented the final interception point. Petrovich understood the situation immediately. Defensive circle, he ordered. Protect the relay. The remaining Valhallans formed firing positions around the communications platform, while wounded personnel were dragged behind overturned cargo transports and damaged loading equipment. Jurgson deployed the autocannon overlooking the primary tunnel entrance, despite severe blood loss from his earlier injuries. Sophia Russa armed the last remaining demolition charges across the station approach corridors, while Valena Gray continued treating casualties beside the relay station under almost impossible conditions. Baru took position directly in front of the defensive line. The Ogryn no longer carried his ripper gun properly. One arm barely functioned after repeated combat trauma and splinter exposure. Large portions of his armor had been shattered away entirely during the retreat through the maintenance tunnels. Yet he still stood between the surviving guardsmen and the approaching Drukhari assault forces without hesitation. The station battle became close range immediately. Drukhari warriors surged through the darkness using the station architecture for cover, while skimmer drones descended from maintenance shafts overhead, firing concentrated splinter bursts into the defensive positions below. The confined environment amplified every sound violently. Weapon fire echoed through the transit chambers, while steam vents screamed from ruptured coolant lines surrounding the station. Kallus fought beside Petrovich near the communications relay, during the opening minutes of the assault. The Commissar emptied his bolt pistol into advancing Drukhari infantry, while Petrovich coordinated firing rotations among the surviving guardsmen with remarkable control, despite the chaos unfolding around them. Every soldier remaining in the station understood the reality clearly now. There would be no further retreat. Either the line held long enough for extraction to arrive, or everyone in Sigma 4 died underground. Sophia Russa detonated the first tunnel collapse shortly afterward. Massive explosions tore through the eastern maintenance corridors as demolition charges buried one of the enemy approach routes beneath thousands of tons of ice, steel, and fractured concrete. The shockwave nearly collapsed portions of the station itself, but it slowed the Drukhari advance long enough for the defenders to regroup around the relay platform. Jurgson continued firing the autocannon almost continuously, despite the weapon beginning to overheat beneath sustained operation. Spent shell casings covered the platform floor around him, while blood loss gradually weakened his movements. Kallus noticed the heavy gunner manually stabilizing his wounded arm between firing bursts simply to continue operating the weapon. Still, he never stopped. The Drukhari adapted again. Additional assault teams descended through elevated maintenance gantries surrounding the station ceiling, while splinter fire concentrated heavily upon the communications relay itself. Several Vox operators died almost instantly during the barrage. Valena Gray dragged one wounded technician behind cover, while continuing to transmit extraction coordinates toward Imperial forces above the Hive. Then the station shook violently. A new sound rolled through the underground corridors beyond the battle. Heavy impacts, rhythmic, mechanical. Kallus recognized it immediately. Bolter fire. Not Astra Militarum pattern weapons. Astartes. The Iron Hands entered Sigma 4 through the western transit tunnels approximately 3 minutes later. The arrival changed the battle instantly. Massive armored figures emerged from the darkness, advancing through the station corridors with terrifying precision, while heavy bolter fire obliterated Drukhari positions across the loading sectors. The Iron Hands moved without hesitation or wasted motion, their black ceramite armor reflecting the emergency strobes, while mechanical augmentations whined beneath the station noise. Kallus counted at least 7 Space Marines during the initial breach. That was enough. The Drukhari assault collapsed almost immediately under concentrated Astartes firepower. Xenos warriors, who had moved through the defenders with near impunity moments earlier, were torn apart by explosive bolter rounds and plasma fire. Several attempted withdrawing deeper into the tunnel network before being intercepted by advancing Iron Hands assault units, moving with brutal efficiency through the station corridors. The surviving guardsmen barely reacted at first. Exhaustion had pushed many beyond emotional response entirely. Petrovich lowered his laser gun slowly, while watching one Iron Hands Marine crush a wounded Drukhari warrior beneath armored boots before continuing forward without pause. The battle ended shortly afterward. The remaining enemy forces withdrew completely from Sigma 4 once the Astartes secured the station entrances and surrounding transit corridors. No pursuit orders were issued toward the surviving Valhallans. The Iron Hands focused exclusively upon stabilizing the underground network and preparing larger counter-offensive operations deeper within the Hive outskirts. For the defenders of Theta-Nine, the war effectively ended there. Extraction operations began within the hour. Imperial medici teams arrived alongside additional reinforcement elements, moving through the secured transit systems beneath Glaciem Primus. Surviving guardsmen were evacuated toward central Hive districts for treatment and debriefing, while Iron Hand's strike forces advanced northward to reclaim the refinery sectors, still contested by Drukhari raiding forces above. Kallus accompanied the surviving members of Petrovich's squad aboard an armored transport crawler moving toward Hive Glaciem Primus Central Command shortly before dawn. The interior remained silent throughout most of the journey. No one possessed enough remaining energy for conversation. Baru lost consciousness twice during transport before medici personnel finally stabilized his condition with emergency surgical intervention. The Ogryn's survival probability remained uncertain for several days afterward due to extensive toxin exposure and internal trauma. Ferik Jurgson collapsed immediately after surrendering the autocannon to recovery crews. Surgeons later removed significant quantities of shrapnel from his torso and left arm during a 9-hour operation beneath the central Hive medici district. Sophia Russa survived the splinter wound through repeated antitoxin treatments administered after extraction, though permanent nerve damage remained throughout portions of her left side afterward. Dimir Chenkov required treatment for severe cold exposure, hearing degradation, and multiple untreated fractures sustained during the refinery collapse. Valena Gray continued updating casualty records during transport, until physically unable to remain conscious. Only Anton Petrovich appeared outwardly unchanged. The sergeant sat motionless throughout the extraction convoy, while refinery fires burned across the distant northern horizon beyond the transport vision slits. Kallus studied him quietly for several minutes before speaking. "You held the line," Petrovich answered, without looking away from the burning skyline. "We delayed them." The distinction mattered to him. Several days later, formal debriefing sessions began beneath the central Hive command districts after Imperial forces regained operational control across much of the northern perimeter. Drukhari raiding activity diminished rapidly following the arrival of the Iron Hand's fleet, and associated orbital bombardment operations targeting enemy staging zones beyond the Hive outskirts. The Xenos withdrew before sustained Imperial counteroffensives could fully engage them. That outcome frustrated many commanders. Large portions of the northern industrial sectors had been devastated during the conflict. Casualty projections across the outer Hive districts exceeded several million, including civilian losses. Missing populations and military personnel listed unrecoverable following the raids. Yet, strategically, Glaciem Primus remained operational. The thermal processors survived. The central Hive populations endured. The mission objective had technically succeeded. Commissar Rashir Kallus delivered his final operational testimony approximately 9 days after extraction inside a fortified command chamber beneath the primary Hive citadel. Senior officers from the Astra Militarum, Departamento Munitorum, and Iron Hand's chapter command attended portions of the review personally. The debriefing lasted over 6 hours. Kallus described the initial raids, the defensive collapse of Theta-Nine, the refinery battles, and the underground retreat through Sigma 4 in precise chronological order. He omitted nothing regarding casualty rates, enemy tactics, logistical failures, or command limitations observed during the operation. When questioned regarding the conduct of the Valhallan defenders, Kallus answered simply, They maintained operational discipline under impossible conditions. That statement entered the official record unchanged. Petrovich's squad received formal commendations afterward, alongside the surviving defenders of Theta-Nine. Several officers recommended elevated honors for specific personnel actions during the refinery defense and extraction retreat. Most surviving Valhallans appeared indifferent toward the recognition. Too many names remained missing. The final casualty report for the 109th Valhallan Ice Warriors confirmed catastrophic losses throughout the northern sectors. Entire companies ceased to exist operationally following the Drukhari invasion. Several bunker complexes were never recovered at all beneath the collapsed refinery districts. Recovery teams continued finding bodies for weeks afterward. Some were never identified. Months later, long after active combat operations ended across Glaciem Primus, Commissar Rashir Kallus returned briefly to the outer northern districts during reconstruction inspections, accompanying Departamento Munitorum officials. The storm still covered much of Theta-Nine beneath endless snow and ice. Burned trench systems remained partially visible beneath frozen debris, while shattered refinery towers leaned across the wasteland like broken machinery buried by time. Recovery crews moved slowly through the ruins, searching for unrecovered equipment, bodies, and unexploded munitions scattered throughout the battlefield. Kallus stood alone beside the collapsed northern barricades for several minutes while the storm winds moved across the frozen ruins around him. The battlefield looked smaller than he remembered, quieter. Yet even then, he could still hear the distant echoes of autocannon fire beneath the storm if he remained still long enough. Not because the sounds truly remained there, but because some battlefields never fully leave the soldiers who survive them.